Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on time zones. People are coming into this from lots of different places. Thank you for joining us today for this discussion with our USAID colleagues to talk about the progress made in the implementation of their climate strategy during its first year. My name is Noam Unger, and I am InterAction's Vice President for Development Policy, Advocacy, and Learning. USAID's new climate strategy was released in April of last year, so we are excited to hear about the progress made in its implementation since then. As many of you know, the InterAction community has been very involved in this process from the beginning. Following President Biden's executive order on climate change, we began to refine and deepen our community's understanding of the impacts of climate and sharpen our recommendations for a comprehensive USG response. We pulled together past and present experts to investigate challenges of integrating climate into development and humanitarian work. We then developed strategy considerations and recommendations for USAID on climate adaptation and integration, incorporating feedback and learning from member organizations across our vast coalition. It was summer of 2021 when InterAction convened 5 listening sessions on USAID's proposed new climate strategy. And that involved 98 member organizations and local partners and 58 USAID representatives. Recommendations from those sessions were compiled and shared with USAID ahead of the strategy drafting process. Then, once the draft of the climate strategy was released, InterAction hosted a feedback session in November of 2021. At that event, NGO speakers from around the world highlighted some critical issues for the strategy to tackle, including locally led adaptation, climate mainstreaming, land rights and land use, gender inclusive adaptation, as well as children and youth. And we were very pleased to see all of those issues addressed in the final version of the climate strategy that then came out. All of this is to say that we are very excited for today's conversation and to have the opportunity to dive deeper into the progress made in the implementation of the climate strategy. So let me say a few words about the plan for today's session. First, we're going to hear from Vaughan, who is the Senior Advisor for Climate Change in USAID's Bureau for Resilience and Food Security, and who co-leads implementation of the President's Emergency Plan for Adaptation and Resilience, known as PREPARE, and helps advise the Bureau on the connection between climate change and advancing inclusive agriculture-led growth, resilience, nutrition, and water security, sanitation, and hygiene. We will also then hear from Kathryn Stratos, who leads USAID's Climate and Cross-Sectoral Strategy Division, the office charged with implementing USAID's climate strategy. Kathryn and her team are working to help USAID cultivate a pro-climate development practice and work toward the strategy's goal to advance equitable and ambitious actions to confront the climate crisis. It is great to have both Anne and Kathryn back with us again. They were both here with us in November of 2021 during our feedback session after the release of the draft climate strategy. So it's nice to engage you both consistently throughout the process. After they speak, we're also going to hear from Eduardo Contreras, Country Director for Lutheran World Relief in Peru, who will highlight one of their projects in Peru and how that issue is connected to USAID's climate strategy. And I will be introducing Eduardo a little bit further at that point, but he will be presenting in Spanish, and we will have Claudia Sanchez de Lozada, InterAction Senior Manager for Climate and Environment, translating his remarks. Then we're going to have the opportunity to dig even deeper into the progress of implementing the climate strategy with a series of questions for you all. The questions we will ask and answer first were submitted ahead of time, and we focused on getting a variety of different topics covered. But if you have a question for USAID during today's discussion, please do not feel shy. I encourage you to add them to the chat with your name and organization, because we will try to call on as many of you as possible to ask your questions live. And our USAID colleagues will also try to answer some of them in the chat as well. As a first step, we're lucky to have our USAID speakers to give us an update on the implementation of the climate strategy. So welcome Anne and Kathryn.
No, thanks. Thank you so much. I first wanted to thank you, InterAction, and then all of the community for the amazing input that you just outlined. You took some of the words out of our mouth. We are really excited about the strategy, thanks to your all's input, and we're really excited about the progress that we've made to date, but could not do that at all without the partnership and the work and the voices, actions, and contributions you all make. So a huge heartfelt thanks to you all. And let me turn to Kathryn real quickly. We wanted to start with a little bit of a quiz. So Kathryn, over to you for a minute.
Sure. And I will just update the intro. We are, Anne and I are now in the same bureau, in the newly established Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security. And our office is being upgraded to a Center for Pro-Climate Development. So I'm pretty excited about that. But we thought it'd be great to get a bit of a feel for who's with us today and what you're focused on. So maybe people can respond with the little reaction button and just give us a thumbs up or whatever you wish. So first question, how many of your organizations are mainly focused on building your partner's climate adaptation capacities? So climate adaptation. I'll just wait a moment while you find the reaction button, and with that you can choose an emoji. We've got 101 participants. So which of your organizations are mainly focused on adaptation? I wonder, has it been disabled, or I just can't see it?
I see, Kathryn, I only see about 10 hands, 10 thumbs up, maybe more.
Okay.
I'm trying to count and keep up.
Okay, good. You give me the, because I'm not seeing it. Must be how I logged in. Okay, so how many of your organizations are mainly focused on mitigation, on reducing greenhouse gas emissions?
Oh, they're coming
How
in
many
fast. Yeah.
Okay. And then how many of your organizations are looking at the sustainability and the resilience of your own operations, trying to reduce your carbon footprint, that type of thing? How many do you see, Anne?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, so, 10. Okay. And maybe some of them are doing everything, or some of your organizations just leaning in and doing all the 3 of those things? How many, Anne?
We're getting, I think I got 19.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. That's great. That's a great start. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anne to start us off. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kathryn, and thanks all for participating in that. It's good to see where folks are. So we'll go, I think, right to the next slide, Joey, and get right into our USAID's climate goals and our targets. Hopefully, I'm pretty sure most of you have seen this slide before, but these are our North Stars, our targets for the climate strategy through 2030. And we think are happy that they are pretty ambitious. If you think about it, we're trying to reduce 6 billion tons for our mitigation target of CO2. That's about the US annual emissions, or taking about 1 billion cars off the road for a year. And in terms of helping save hectaacres, we're trying to save 100 million hectaacres, which is an area 2.5 times the size of California. So again, we've got ambitious targets that we're pretty excited about to partner with you all to help reach. But again, hopefully you've seen those before. We can go to the next slide so we can dig into the progress that we've had so far. So as you know, our climate strategy just turned a year old, and we think we've done a lot this past year. And if you haven't seen it, would really recommend, and kudos to Kathryn and Joey and our team that works on this. We've published a year 1 progress review with some of our highlights over the past year, and we'll drop a link into the chat so you can see some of the pretty exciting stories and work and accomplishments that we've had. Just to highlight a couple of the results so far, since the start of the Biden administration about 2.5 years ago, we've almost doubled our climate investments and launched new work. But climate is still just about 5% of USAID's budget, and our budget really pales in comparison to the scale of the climate crisis. We are doing what we can to increase the direct climate funding, but considering how climate impacts all sectors, we are also looking to find ways to integrate climate into USAID's broader portfolio, from water to food security to infrastructure, you name it. And of course, we'll also continue to make the case for increasing funding for this work in line with the president's budget request. But let's get into some of the few highlights of what we've done. outside of budgets and numbers, we're very proud that we've conserved over 60 million hectares of land that absorb carbon. And again, our goal for 2030, we're trying to get to 100 million hectares, an area 2.5 times the size of California. And then last year, this is one of my favorite topics, our programs mobilized over 340 million in climate finance for adaptation. And that's not easy to do. As you're aware, adaptation is woefully underfunded as climate disasters increase in frequency and severity. And so we're real proud of this number and eager to build on it. And as also, you've heard us say before, USAID is and needs to be a climate agency. And we think we're making progress on how we sort of put climate into our DNA. So for example, BHA, our Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, is expanding their work on early warning systems for things like cyclones, droughts, and floods, which are getting more extreme thanks to climate change. And our Gen Dev team has launched a new and really exciting Climate Gender Equity Fund and has several new activities to support land rights and green jobs for women. And then we're real proud our Bureau for Management is working with bureaus across the agency to reduce our carbon emissions in our supply chains and in other areas too. But just for example, in our supply chain, we're working on reducing our packaging waste in health and humanitarian assistance supplies. And I think all of you know that focusing on climate is really critical as climate change touches everything USAID does. And ultimately, we cannot meet our development goals if we don't address climate change. And we've also been busy and working to help the whole of government meet the challenge on climate change. For example, we help co-lead the President's Emergency Plan for Adaptation and Resilience, which again is a whole of government response to building the climate resilience of 500 million people in the developing countries. And as you know, or hopefully have heard at COP last year, Administrator Power helped launch a call to the private sector to invest in adaptation in support of Prepare. So we're working both private sector with you all and in trying new and creative ways to try to help reach that big target of helping 500 million people become more climate resilient. And then let's skip to the next slide. Joey, thanks. So strategy and action. We wanted to give you kind of a specific country example, and hopefully we'll hear more from our colleagues on this next panel about what does climate action look like and what does our climate strategy look like in action. So would love to dig into our country example in Bangladesh. So in last year, 2022, USAID and the government of Bangladesh provided more than 250,000 farmers in disaster-prone areas with access to timely and location-specific weather advisories. So together, working with the government and other partners, we implemented a system to disseminate alerts through cell phones to warn of heavy rain, severe cold, and floods, empowering people to take action before disaster strikes. Farmers then that partnered with aid saved an average of $466.74 cents, $466, basically $467, that would have been production that would have been lost due to climate disasters. And that's pretty significant savings in a country where the average annual income is just under $3,000 a year. So this work is contributing to a more resilient and secure food system while making people more resilient to climate impacts. So we're pretty excited about just that example and others. And let me turn to Kathryn to put some more color on some of our work. Over to you, Kathryn.
Thanks, Anne. Another example we wanted to highlight is from the President's Malaria Initiative. So, we've long known that that climate change affects vector-borne illnesses such as malaria or dengue. But there's also the impacts of severe climate events, and those can affect the treatment and prevention activities that are so important to keeping illnesses such as malaria in check. So when Tropical Cyclone Freddy struck in Mozambique this year, the Malaria Initiative really worked with local authorities and other stakeholders to do a few things to really stay on top of it. So they worked in 2 of the most affected provinces to make sure they had enough malaria rapid diagnostic tests and malaria treatments. They also set up temporary clinics near the accommodations for displaced people. And they also did some indoor spraying in those accommodation centers. So really trying to help nip an outbreak in the bud. And then the thing that we're really proud of them and really impressed by is they really took our special objective to do our part to heart. And they have transitioned from relying primarily on air freight to move their supplies to using sea and land transport. And by doing that, they have reduced their emissions since 2019 by half. So like from 2019 to 2022, they've halved their greenhouse gas emissions, their carbon footprint, which is pretty awesome. Next slide, please. So as we look ahead, we have this kind of bifurcated approach. We have the focus on climate integration, such as the example I just shared. And by the way, my question.
Kathryn, I think you accidentally muted yourself. So I just want
Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, so my question was really within climate, do you focus more on adaptation, mitigation, or perhaps on your own operations? But so we are focused on integration and on helping our colleagues from sectors and regions that have not been involved in climate work in the past build their capacities, their knowledge, and really help their partners be more aware about climate change and inform them about things they can do to put their sectors on a climate resilient and low emissions pathway. So that's one really important element, and it does not need to necessarily cost much money. We know the Hill is very concerned that we not use funding that was meant for one thing for another. We think a lot of these things can be done at very low or even no cost. And then there's the important work of really scaling up and having big impacts and promoting systems change to both reduce emissions and build up countries' adaptation capacities. And that is mainly the responsibility of those of us who are working with the direct funding. But there is lots of room for support and for using the talents of other sectors to do that effectively. So in that area, we're really looking for that transformative change. Because as Anne said, our budget is just 5% of AID's budget. So we need to do what we can to work smarter, to work at the national policy level, to look at people's attitudes and ways of doing things, and really try to shape incentives and behaviors. So is there anything else I want to say? Yeah, so I think that pretty much sums it up. We really are looking to connect with other AID priorities with the localization agenda. There's lots of overlap. There's so much of effective development and effective climate action is working with your local stakeholders and through your local partners and empowering them, with that focus on critical populations being a really important part of our strategy. We're also working with multilateral banks and climate funds, such as the Green Climate Fund, to really make it more accessible to local institutions and to be a complement to our bilateral funding. So we really are excited to see that a lot of the projects that GCF is bringing forward have benefited from some AID technical assistance and support. So that is one way we're really trying to both improve our own effectiveness as well as the responsiveness of the GCF. And then finally, we're focused on the intersection with fragility and with conflict, and really looking at where we have, where we can take a cross-sectoral approach and make both of our programmings and approaches more sound. So with that, I'm going to end because we really would like to hear from you and hear about the experiences that you're having. I will say, don't hesitate to reach out to climatestrategy@usaid.gov if you have questions. We're also very focused on using climatelinks.org as a place to put our own training, our own guidance that we're developing for the agency. Our mantra is always, if it can possibly be on in the public sphere, it should be, so that our wider community can benefit from it. So with that, we will take a pause here and I guess move over to our next speaker. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kathryn, and thank you, Anne, as well, for the work that you are leading with so many colleagues across the agency, and for these examples and that overview of ways in which you are deepening and reorienting much of the agency's work. To bring in a different perspective, I'm going to welcome Eduardo Contreras, who is the country director for Lutheran World Relief Peru. Eduardo joined Lutheran World Relief Peru 12 years ago as a program manager after working as a rural development manager and regional technical assistant for Latin America and the Caribbean with Catholic Relief Services for 7 years. So he's somebody who brings a deep well of experience, and we'll be talking today about gender-focused climate-smart agriculture. And as I mentioned at the start, Eduardo will be presenting in Spanish, and we will have Claudia Sanchez de la Sada, InterAction Senior Manager for all things climate and environment, translating his remarks. Welcome.
Gracias. Muchas gracias, Nom. Muy amable. Y permítame primero agradecer la oportunidad de poder compartir estas iniciales experiencias en el marco de este proyecto que acabamos de iniciar hace apenas 3 meses y medio, ¿no? Este nuevo proyecto que estamos iniciando tiene un horizonte temporal de 3 años. Esperamos terminarlo en el 2026. Se enfoca en aproximadamente 1.200 productores y productoras y canaliza un fondo de alrededor de 2.3 millones de dólares, ¿no? Tenemos el compromiso de generar un apalancamiento del sector privado de alrededor de 7 millones de dólares. Nuestros principales soportes locales son las cooperativas y en particular 3, una de las cuales es una organización de mujeres constituida por mujeres líderes, ¿no? Que como vamos a ver luego, constituyen un referente muy importante en este territorio.
I can go ahead and do a quick translation of what Eduardo just shared. He's talking about this particular project that just started about 3 months ago, and that is scheduled to go to run until 2026, and it will impact approximately 1,200 producers of cacao, and it includes part of the funding is $2.3 million from USAID, and approximately they're hoping to leverage $7 million from the private sector for this particular project. And one of the important portions of this project is working with local cooperatives, including a totally women-led cooperative called Cori Warmi, and Eduardo will talk more about that particular cooperative in some of the further slides.
¿Cuál es el territorio? Este es un territorio ubicado, para los que conocen el Perú, está ubicado en el corazón de los Andes del sur de nuestro país. Es un territorio configurado no exactamente por las delimitaciones políticas de estas regiones o departamentos, ¿no? Que son 5 en general, sino es un territorio que se ha configurado durante los últimos años como parte de las políticas oficiales para tratar de erradicar la expansión agresiva de los cultivos ilícitos y que es configurado por el curso de varios ríos, ¿no? Es una gran cuenca que vienen de los Andes más altos y van bajando hacia el sur, hacia la región amazónica.
So to provide a little bit of the context of the area where this project is taking place, Eduardo wanted to highlight that it is not necessarily a territory or an area that is that has the boundary set by the specific departments or the specific states within a particular state, but it's actually within a watershed, and the area is in the central portion of the southern Andes in Peru. So it includes different areas, but the following states: the states of Ayacucho, Junín, Cusco, Huancavelica, and Apurímac. And the important thing to note about this region is that like Eduardo said, the boundaries are not necessarily the political boundaries, but they are the boundaries that have happened due to the fight against, or it's sort of an area that has been delimited by the production of coca plants.
Como ustedes imaginarán, el curso de los ríos configura, por lo demás, un territorio de extraordinaria belleza y diversidad ambiental. Ahí viven aproximadamente unas 500,000 personas. Una gran parte son colonos que durante los últimos años han bajado de las regiones andinas hacia las zonas más amazónicas, pero también persisten comunidades amazónicas como las ayánicas y como las machiguengas, culturas ancestrales que han gestionado estos territorios miles de años.
So this area is particularly beautiful. The landscapes that you can find in that area are beautiful. And one of the things that Eduardo was highlighting was that the population that is present in that area are people that have migrated from other areas, but there's also a lot of indigenous communities that are found in that area.
Las condiciones excepcionales del entorno ambiental ha generado condiciones también propicias para que en los últimos 25, 30 años haya una agresiva expansión de los cultivos ilícitos. En el Perú tenemos aproximadamente 81,000 hectáreas de coca, de cultivos de hojas de coca. Más o menos 32,000, es decir, el 40% se encuentran ubicadas en este territorio.
So, because of the particularly just exceptional conditions of this area, what this has led to is the aggressive expansion of the hectares of coca plantations in that particular area. There are approximately, in all of Peru, there are approximately 81,000 hectares of coca plantations, and about 40% of the area of these coca plantations are located in this particular territory or area.
Obviamente, la expansión de la coca ha traído como consecuencia también la presencia de organizaciones narcotraficantes y en los últimos años, condicionada por la guerra interna que hemos tenido, la aparición de los grupos terroristas.
And because of these, the presence of the coca plantations, this has also led to an increase in drug trafficking in the area. And in the last years, because of the political instability of the country, that has led also to the increase, or an increase of the presence of some of the terrorist organizations.
Los factores de esperanza de desarrollo de esta región se encuentran, sin embargo, en el cacao. Así como hay agricultura ilícita, existen aproximadamente 30,000 hectáreas de cacao. Y de cacao de altísima calidad, que ofrecen las oportunidades a los productores de generar mejores ingresos y mejores condiciones de vida.
So the good news is that because of these particular very nice conditions for agricultural production, this area is also an area that is known to have really great quality cacao crops or species of cacao, and they have approximately 30,000 hectares of cacao plantations in this particular region.
Lo bajo de niveles de organización que tienen los productores, sin embargo, es un gran desafío para cualquier esfuerzo de desarrollo. La mayoría no está organizado. Y como ustedes saben, la organización es el elemento fundamental. No basta tener las ideas justas. Es necesario tener también la fuerza organizacional para hacerse oír y realizar económicamente sus negocios.
So even though there's this really great quality cacao in the area, one of the problems is that 90% of the producers of cacao in the area don't belong to any cooperative, so they're not organized in a specific way that is helping them develop their businesses. So that's where there's a big opportunity to improve their economic conditions through organizing them.
Bueno, nuestro objetivo es mejorar los ingresos de los productores y productoras locales, ¿no? Basándonos en la coca, pero en el cacao, pero no solamente en el cacao, sino también con actividades productivas y de servicios complementarias a las fincas que tienen los cacaoteros de este territorio.
So the main focus is to obviously increase the producers' income from these really fine quality cacao. But in addition to that, the focus is not just in that, but also to provide them with additional services that will help these cacao farmers in the region.
¿Qué son los principales enfoques de nuestro trabajo? Lo que nosotros buscamos en los próximos años es intensificar la producción y el incremento de la productividad a través de las estrategias de renovación y rehabilitación. Para nosotros, lo más importante no es expandir más áreas de cultivos, sino intensificar las que ya tenemos, ¿no? Hacer una política de esta naturaleza nos lleva a optimizar lo que ya tenemos, además de altísima calidad, con, digamos, protegiendo el entorno ambiental a través de tecnologías limpias que permitan tener cacaos certificados exigidos actualmente por el mercado nacional y el mercado internacional.
So one of the main focus of the project is not necessarily to increase the areas of cacao growth, but to intensify the production, making the farmers, the current farmers more, their production more effective, and taking advantage of that high quality cacao, and also making sure that that certification that comes from that high quality cacao goes forward so that the farmers can benefit from that.
Nosotros consideramos que es de fundamental importancia fortalecer los esfuerzos de organización, principalmente de las mujeres cacaoteras. En los últimos 6 años, nuestra organización ha venido fortaleciendo una cooperativa de mujeres, Coriwarmi se llama, y que en idioma quechua significa mujeres de oro, mujeres que han logrado mejorar su producción, mejorar su productividad, producir grano de extraordinaria calidad, identificando variedades locales de muchísimo valor en aroma y en finura, pero también producir chocolates que ya están siendo colocados en los mercados a nivel nacional e internacional.
So part of the work that Lutheran World has been doing in this particular area is to also help elevate some of the women cooperatives, and in particular, they're working with a cooperative called Coriwarmi, which in Quechua that means golden women, and they've been working with this cooperative to help these women elevate and produce higher quality cacao to the point that now they're producing really high quality chocolate that it's being exported internationally also, and you know, within the national market too, but also most importantly, it's being exported.
La asociatividad es un elemento fundamental para promover el desarrollo. No creemos nosotros que no es posible, digamos, hacerlo si es que los agricultores no se encuentran organizados. Necesariamente tienen que organizarse y la forma de hacerlo, desde nuestro punto de vista, son las cooperativas. La cooperativa es la mejor forma de agregar valor, ¿no?, para poder desafiar el mercado, que es cada vez más exigente en diferentes aspectos, ¿no? En la calidad, ¿no? En los procesos de postproducción, que son, digamos, procesos extremadamente delicados para mantener la calidad genética del producto. Y eso es la mejor forma de hacerlo, es a través de la asociatividad.
So one of the main problems and areas that this project is focused on is the fact that, as he had said earlier, over 90% of cacao producers in all of Peru are not organized. So they see it as an imperative task for this project and for development in general of these cacao producers to create associations and cooperatives that can represent the shared interests of the producers, and with that generate better business deals for the producers of cacao, and also to help them elevate and improve some of the native cacao varieties in the area.
Las experiencias que hemos tenido durante los últimos años en este territorio nos ha permitido identificar varias variedades locales que son una extraordinaria oportunidad, digamos, para crecer, para mejorar ingresos. Pero adicionalmente, los últimos estudios en este territorio han logrado demostrar que los niveles de cadmio, que es uno de los elementos minerales, digamos, que limitan la entrada del grano a mercados internacionales, principalmente europeos, en este territorio son de muy bajo nivel, lo cual ofrece enormes posibilidades de seguir creciendo en beneficio de los productores.
One of the things that Eduardo wanted to highlight is that some of the native cacao varieties that are found in this area are of extraordinary flavor and aroma, and because of that, have tremendous economic value. And one of the things that they've discovered pretty recently was that these cacao varieties in this area have very low levels of cadmium, which is one of the things that one of the conditions that restrict its export to certain markets. So because of the very low levels of cadmium in these particular varieties in the region, it has helped open up markets, particularly in Europe, to export some of these cacao.
Si bien el cacao es un producto de alto valor económico, sin embargo, desde nuestro punto de vista, generar el desarrollo en ámbitos de esta naturaleza exige incorporar otros elementos de la finca. El cacao por sí mismo ayuda, pero no es absolutamente posible generar el desarrollo si es que nos centramos única y exclusivamente en el cacao. Estamos nosotros aspirando a incorporar otras actividades económicas colaterales, pero también servicios. Por ejemplo, este territorio, dado la extraordinaria belleza de su paisaje, ofrece oportunidades para desarrollar iniciativas, pequeñas iniciativas, emprendedurismos que permitan poner en valor esa oferta ambiental que tenemos para, digamos, generar rutas turísticas vinculadas a la naturaleza, por ejemplo.
So not only are they looking at enhancing and incrementing the production of cacao in the area, but also they're looking at other potentially economic viable solutions solutions that bring extra benefits to the people in the area, including because of the beauty of the area, they're trying to build up the tourism sector so that that can bring additional income to the people in the area.
Next, please. Bueno, los resultados que nosotros esperamos tener en los próximos 3 años es, obviamente, incrementar la producción y la productividad principalmente del cacao fino de aroma, ¿no? Basándonos en estas variedades de extraordinaria calidad que hemos identificado a través de, digamos, de no expandir, pero sí renovar y rehabilitar las plantaciones que ya tenemos. Digamos, incrementar o mejorar, digamos, la propuesta tecnológica que tenemos a través de podas, a través del mejoramiento del riego, a través del mejoramiento de la fertilidad de los suelos, etcétera, que son factores cruciales para poder mejorar la producción y la productividad.
So one of the expected results from this project is to increase, like he had mentioned earlier, the production of high quality cacao, and doing so with different solutions, including increasing the soil productivity, enhancing the business capacity for the local cooperatives also, and work to increase the quality of the cacao that is being produced.
Nosotros esperamos fortalecer la diversificación de las fincas, ¿no? Como decía hace un momento, no solo en producción agropecuaria, sino también en servicios, ¿no? El desarrollo, por ejemplo, de rutas turísticas, de rutas que permitan aprovechar el entorno ambiental, nos parece que tiene un enorme potencial para poder desarrollarse en los próximos años.
So in addition to increasing the economic or the production of cacao, they're also looking at the other alternatives. Like you have mentioned, in particular, increasing the tourism in the area, because they see a lot of potential for that.
Y finalmente lo que nosotros estamos buscando es, digamos, mejorar la percepción que se tiene sobre el cacao local, ¿ya? Y debo comentarles, por ejemplo, que los cultivos ilícitos desarrollan una campaña de posicionamiento local, regional, de altísima inversión a fin de naturalizar la producción de los cultivos ilícitos, ¿no? De manera que eso se ha vuelto parte de la vida cotidiana, se ha naturalizado totalmente. Y nosotros consideramos que hay que hacer campañas de cara a los cultivos lícitos como el cacao y otros para posicionar el valor, digamos, que tiene, y no solamente valor cultural, sino valor económico. Las variedades que disponemos en esa zona y los bajos niveles de cadmio que existen nos ofrecen esa oportunidad. Y nosotros estamos muy interesados en, digamos, cambiar esa percepción a través de un conjunto de actividades que tenemos organizadas en los próximos meses y en los próximos 3 años.
And one of the last outcomes that or expected results from that are wanted from this project is the fact that this area has been known as, you know, an area of high coca production, and because of that, it has a bad reputation, or the reputation is that it's an area of coca production. And through this project, they're hoping to change the way in which this area is seen, and for the area to be also known as an area of high quality cacao production, and an area of just beauty, and an area that local people want to see and want to know more about, hopefully through this good campaign of the production of excellent quality cacao, and hopefully some tourism also.
Gracias, Claudia. Si hubiera preguntas, con mucho gusto.
And Eduardo is happy to answer any questions, and we can take those later on. Muchísimas gracias, Eduardo.
Yes, muchísimas gracias, Eduardo. Thank you, Eduardo. Y ya hay algunas preguntas en el chat. We already have several questions in the chat, and actually what I'm going to do is turn it back over to Claudia to facilitate some of the Q&A in the time we have remaining. So Claudia, over to you.
Thanks, Noam. So we had asked people to submit some questions ahead of time because we knew we were going to have so many people attend this event. So I have a couple of ones that were submitted and that we wanted to highlight. So, but I also wanted to say that if you have any additional questions, please put them in the chat. Please raise your hands. We're going to try to get to as many of your questions as possible. And I'm sure that our USAID friends will be happy to answer some of those questions that we don't get to, maybe offline if we put them in the chat. So with that, I'll get us started with a question that came from Andrew Fuse. He's a senior technical advisor from Church World Service. And unfortunately, his mic is not working. So he asked me to read the question for him. So his question was that he wanted to know, or he wanted to ask if USAID colleagues could discuss any initial progress in responding to climate impacts on human mobility. The 2022 to 2030 strategy references the 2021 White House report on the impact of climate change on migration and notes that USAID activities will address key drivers of migration, respond to displacement, and support people who choose to move as a livelihood, diversification, risk management, and adaptation strategy. And examples of activities included were increased focus on research and analysis and targeting of program support to migrant sending communities, also receiving communities and those facing risks of involuntary immobility in the face of climate hazards, i.e. trapped populations. So Andrew is curious to know whether USAID has developed or is developing a way of tracking these activities that relate to climate and human mobility across sectors and geographies as a building block for future learning and assessment.
That's a great question. Thank you for that. And I'm trying to find, and we'll put in the chat, some of our recent guidance and works that looks at migration as an adaptation strategy, because we know with increasing climate impacts, people are already moving. There's some incredibly compelling data out of sub-Saharan Africa on that I'll try to also dump in the chat, but I think Andrew from Church World Service might already know this. So short answer is yes, we're, I think, seized by this, have put out some papers in the last 6 months that address this and are also working closely with the White House on that, the report that was referenced, a White House report on climate and migration that came out a year and a half ago. I'm getting my dates wrong, but came out a while ago, are also digging into sort of how to make sure we're moving things and continuing to look at the impacts of climate change on migration as part of PREPARE, the President's Emergency Plan for Adaptation and Resilience. We also have migration and look and dig into that as a cross-cutting issue. Again, because you see what's happening. Especially at first, often internally displaced people will move internally within your own country, often to urban areas. So it's a pretty complex problem with not one specific solution set. But I think as we increasingly look at urban work also, that will have to address some of the increased problem sets people face when they come and have to move to cities with sometimes less resources as they are having to move from climate impacts. But let me drop the latest and greatest into the chat too. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. And next, I wanted to call on Mara Dolan. She's the program manager at We Do. Mara, if you wouldn't mind coming off mute and asking your question.
Hi there, absolutely. Thanks for holding this space, y'all. And my name is Mara. I'm with the Women's Environment and Development Organization. And my question is, one of the embedded principles of the strategy we know is private sector engagement, and we are aware that the administration, state, and USAID are initiating and working with a variety of new partnerships, private partnerships in the last year of the strategy. Last year at COP27, the global climate talks, we learned about the partnership launched with Amazon, focusing on gender equality and climate from the lens of women-led businesses. Can you share a little bit more about the progress and status of this initiative in detail, as well as outline some of the key guardrails and guidelines you are instituting with all private partner private sector partnerships to ensure they're advancing human rights-based and non-exploitative principles? Thanks.
I can take a bit. I would love if Kathryn, we've actually got some other aid colleagues on the horn who might be able to chime in too. But just in terms of sort of vetting our companies, we do. I worked real hard last year on the Prepare Private Sector Call to Action, where we had 12 companies, 10 last year, and we've had 2 more join. Who are committing to making and incorporating more adaptation into their work, and have had deep conversations with them about sort of their commitment and bluntly the vetting to make sure that these are good actors in this space. Then the fund has done some great work. It's our Gen Dev colleagues who have really been pounding the pavement on it, and Amazon. So hoping someone else from AID might be able to chime in with more details on what's been funded to date out of the Amazon fund. If not, we can get back to folks. Anybody?
Yeah, I think just yesterday I had that document up, but I can't find it right now. And they really are leaning in on the gender piece. And I'll just add, not directly in response to your question, but we are also working closely with our gender colleagues on in 6 countries that would like to take on a gender-focused systems change goal. So really looking at women's role in climate action and their opportunity to both benefit and to help shape climate action. So we do have quite a bit of interaction with them, as well as kind of integrating our training with each other to build climate into their gender training and gender into our climate training and actions. I also will say we are also working on a mechanism that will help us look at social safeguards in our activities so that we are ensuring that we are not having an adverse impact in the activities that we develop. So that is not only specific to gender, but really improving our programming guidance and approach to ensure we're looking at social safeguards, as well as the environmental compliance, which is far more institutionalized at EID. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I'll queue up 2 questions that have come up on the chat box. I think we have time for maybe answering those 2. There's a question from Kelsey from Alliance for Peace Building. Could you share a little bit more on the integration of conflict prevention within the implementation of the strategy?
I can start, and then maybe Anne, you want to pick up. A big piece of doing this effectively will be to, again, build our capacities in a cross-cutting way. So we do have some expertise in climate and conflict in our CPS Bureau. Conflict, what does it stand for, Anne? Peace and stability, I think. Yeah. And what our colleagues there are trying to do is really raise the awareness of the broader kind of conflict and development community in that bureau of climate impacts and how it can shape and exacerbate ongoing tensions and conflicts. And then at the same time, we're taking the systems approach, and one of the most important things that we are trying to do is bring in the expertise from other offices and sectors within a mission, so that we're taking a holistic look when we design our projects and design our systems work. And I really want to commend our AID missions. Almost all of them have submitted their update to their climate annex. That's a part of their current CDCS. And they really, most of them have really been very proactive to bring representatives from across the mission together to look at what the climate opportunities are within their portfolio and to look at how they can improve that programming with the skills and talents they have within the team. And then we are building on that with the real like whole of mission capacity building opportunities, technical assistance programs, where we work with missions to develop a cross-cutting climate action plan. And I think those type of approaches are so important to addressing conflict, addressing inequality, really pushing forward on a just transition to renewable energy or an equitable approach to adaptation. I hope that begins to answer your question. Thank you.
Okay, we have a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to ask the next two questions and ask our colleagues to be super short in their answers. And I have one question for our USAID friends and another one for Eduardo. So let me ask the USAID question first, and it's from Abby Gunner from the Solidarity Center. And the question is, how is USAID planning to engage with labor unions or support labor movement engagement on advancing a just transition and climate action?
Kathryn maybe want to jump in on that, but I just know as part of Prepare, we've really green jobs and opportunities, especially for youth. So something that I think we haven't talked about much today, but do need to continue to push on is how do we create these opportunities in a radically changing world for youth. So our youth and also changing labor markets. So we've done some deep dives into that, especially in the food security space and how the world's going to look different. One of the cool things about the climate strategy is it looks at systems level change, and that we have to be looking with a systems lens at how we're addressing the challenges that we're facing across food system, infrastructure, you name it. So really incorporating green jobs and thinking into that. But Kathryn also has, I know, some good examples on that front. Over to you. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think one of the bright spots for me under this strategy has been the very proactive engagement of our Center for Democracy, Rights, and Governance, which, and one of the most, active members is, the person working with our trade union work. I think, our opportunities really are in those countries where we're supporting, the first opportunity that comes to mind is where we're working on just energy transition partnerships. South Africa in particular, where, working with the trade unions is so important to having a successful effort. And I think we're well placed to do that. And our South Africa mission is one of those missions that is taking that cross-sectoral approach to looking at what they can do to support the just energy transition work, not just from the financing perspective that, say, our state colleagues are focused on, but looking at the other aspects. Thank you.
And lastly, I have a question for Eduardo. I know that we are 1 minute over time, but Eduardo, si puedes responder la respuesta lo más rápido que puedas. The question that came in on the chat for Eduardo was, it would be great to know if you have any models on what climate impacts will be on cacao. Climate impacts are going to be tough in West Africa with a significant reduction in yield, but we haven't seen any good data on Peru yet. So Eduardo, the question for you is, it would be great, sería muy bueno poder saber qué modelos climáticos utilizaron ustedes para determinar los impactos del cambio climático en la producción de cacao. Se sabe que los impactos del cambio climático van a ser muy fuertes en la parte del oeste de África, con una reducción de producción bastante significante, pero no tienen suficientes datos sobre el impacto que va a tener en el Perú, en la producción de cacao en el Perú, y querían saber si tú podías compartir qué modelos se utilizaron en el programa de ustedes. Eduardo.
Sí, Gloria, estamos, de cara a la pregunta, estamos en ese proceso Estamos tratando de modelar, digamos, los elementos claves que nos permitan hacer esa medición en los próximos 3 años. Consideramos que esto es de crucial importancia porque, en efecto, digamos, el cambio climático está obligando a que muchos productos, a muchas cadenas productivas se estén moviendo en el territorio y todavía no sabemos exactamente qué son las consecuencias de esto, ¿no? La configuración geográfica de los Andes determina determinadas velocidades, digamos, para que estos productos se estén moviendo. El caso de la papa, por ejemplo, es un caso crucial, ¿no? Para las pequeñas economías campesinas. Lo mismo está sucediendo con el cacao y lo mismo está sucediendo con el café. Los límites en los que históricamente se han desarrollado se están moviendo y realmente ese es un elemento fundamental a efectos de diseñar las estrategias para las próximas décadas.
So they're currently developing and building that database to try to figure out exactly how it's going to impact cacao directly. But what Eduardo was saying is that he knows that they've seen in Peru itself that the impacts of climate change are already making some of the crop production shift in location. And in particular in the Andes, he gives the example of potato production and how climate change is pushing the limits on where potato has been traditionally grown. And they see, or they know that there's a certain overlap between the impacts that, or they can take some of the data and the knowledge that they've gained from what climate change is doing to potato production in the Andes to and extrapolate some of that to cacao production, but they're hoping to develop more data so that they can more clearly define how it's going to impact cacao production specifically. But they've already seen the impact in some other crops, so they're hoping to use some of that data to model some of what's happening to cacao production.
Well, thank you, everyone who's participated in this conversation. Obviously, we've only had 1 hour for what could be many hours and will be a lot of time for continued discussion and exchanges. I want to give a special thanks to Anne Vaughan and Kathryn Stratos and Eduardo Contreras and Claudia Sanchez de la Sara. And also to so many of the rest of you who have so much experience to bring to this conversation. And I want to thank the InterAction team that's been crucial in pulling this together. Claudia, as I mentioned, but also Kelsey Maddox, Caitlin St. Amor, Chris Askew Merwin, Brian Aka, and Gino Rady. And finally, many thanks to Joey DeMarco from USAID, who was so essential for coordinating this discussion and pulling it together. We are saving the chat, and I know our colleagues at USAID are happy to follow up because there were additional questions that I think will interest you in the chat. And a recording of this event will be made available on InterAction's website in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that announcement, and please share it with your colleagues. Thank you once again to all of you for this excellent conversation and to our colleagues at USAID for your continued work.